Hello and welcome to Alan History Nerd. In this video I'm going to be looking at the time in office as Prime Minister of Liz Truss. Now this is a fairly short period of time, as she was quite famously outlasted by a lettuce. She was gone in under 50 days, so we're again looking about a 44-day, 45-day time as Prime Minister, which was the shortest in British history. So why did this happen and what can we learn about it? As I've mentioned, Liz Truss was Britain's shortest serving Prime Minister. The office of under 50 days, people talk about it 44, 45 days. There was no honeymoon period, but just a series of crises and U-turns through her time in office. The shortness of her term made it even more remarkable by the fact that for the first 10 days of this very short term in office there was essentially a political pause created by the death of the Queen. As Liz Truss's time in office went on, she was mocked for her failings by the media, most notably probably in the Daily Star that had their lettuce cam, and you can see an image of it above as the lettuce Liz Truss celebrating outlasting the real Liz Truss. So what went wrong? And the answer to that really is quite a lot in a short period of time, and I'm going to go into some of the details of that now. On the 5th of September, Liz Truss was announced as the victor in the Tory leadership race, winning with the membership despite having finished behind Sunak in the MPs' votes. I mean, her winning the vote wasn't a surprise. She was the forerunner almost right from the beginning in terms of the race with the membership, and she made some really big promises, a lot of which revolved around things that Tory membership like to hear, like I'm going to cut taxes massively, and those taxes are going to particularly benefit some of the better off. There was maybe a bit of forewarning about the potential bits of problems ahead. I mean, Sunak in the leadership debates had warned what catastrophic problems Liz Truss's economic policy could have. Maybe although she won a majority of the party membership and won by quite a considerable distance, the fact that Sunak had been backed by more MPs suggests maybe her time in terms of being in charge of the Conservative Party would be quite difficult, and especially as her as kind of a member of the new right, Thatcherite kind of ideals on the right of the party, which would maybe cause her problems with the more one nation side of the Conservative Party. So she won the race on the 5th of September. On the 6th, she met with the Queen and became the new Prime Minister. But only a couple of days later, the Queen died. And this is the bit where I mentioned earlier. We get this kind of 10-day pause from then onwards as kind of politics is kind of put to one side. And there were the odd kind of controversial moment. I mean, most notably there was kind of TV images of Kwasi Kwarteng obviously having a laugh and maybe sharing a joke whilst sat in the church at the Queen's funeral, which didn't go down particularly well with some people. Now, so Liz Truss, although her time in office was very short, it was first Prime Minister for a long time to serve under two different monarchs. And she had a couple of meetings with Charles. The probably the most infamous moment of this came on the 12th of October, where she met with Charles, and Charles went, "Oh, welcome back again," and then muttered, "Oh dear, oh dear," and this can be seen as a commentary from the King himself on how things were going for Liz Truss by the 12th of October, and she definitely had a fairly tumultuous time. Now, the real crux of Liz Truss's short term in office, and the reason for her fall, is this mini budget, and there were some big bits in it. So the national insurance increase was reversed. New health and social care levy to pay for the NHS was not to be introduced. Standard rate of income tax was cut by 1p from 20p to 19. The 45p rate for income tax for high earners, those earning over 150 grand, was to be abolished. You paid the 45p on every pound over 150 grand. There was the proposed rise in corporation tax from 19% to 25% in April was announced wouldn't happen. And there was changes to the threshold of stamp duty on buying a house that was paid make sure less people paid it. There were also some changes to rules for self-employed, and some changes to other things to do with claiming of benefits. And so there was a whole raft of stuff in this mini budget, and the price tag that many economists and people in the media placed on this was £45 billion worth of tax cuts. And there was then going to be a huge amount of concern because people believed that this level of tax cuts was just not supportable. And so there was panic in the markets. The pound fell very dramatically. Was almost down to $1 to £1. It has recovered quite notably since, particularly following Liz Truss's resignation from office. The value of the UK stock market also fell. Markets fear high debt, government debt, and uncertainty. The interest rate that the UK government had to pay on international debts rose to 4% and kept on going up. Actually, the previous to the tax cut, it was 3% earlier in the year. It'd been under 2%. It was the worst day for the value of government bonds in decades. As the markets fell and lost faith in the UK government, the Bank of England was forced to buy a large number of bonds, and this kind of happened in October, and we saw £65 billion worth of government bonds being bought by the Bank of England to shore up pension schemes and to prevent the market collapsing even further and the pound falling even further. And then high street banks significantly increased the cost of fixed-term mortgages and removed many of the products from the marketplace as they foresaw massive interest rate rises going forward to tackle inflation and to stabilise the pound. Higher mortgage interest rates deepened the cost of living crisis. Many people who were coming off long-term deals suddenly found that their rates jumping up to 5, 6, 7%. And this really kind of deepened the cost of living crisis and the great deal of uncertainty going forward, and people started to kind of be really fearful and how they were going to afford to pay their mortgages, how they were going to pay their other bills as their mortgage went up, all those kind of things. We then see some massive U-turns as the government had to kind of pull back on the policies it did, and we see Kwarteng and Truss kind of having to take back things that they've been pushing and things that they've said were absolutely key. So Kwarteng abandoned the abolition of the 45p rate of income tax, and Truss speaks to the media, so you kind of maybe the timing's wrong. And obviously there'd been a hugely angry kickback to the middle of a cost of living crisis that the government was delivering expensive tax cuts to the best off, the most well off. Truss had had an interview only hours before defending its abolition and saying it was the right policy. So it's quite clear that this is a change that Kwarteng and Truss don't want to make, but have been forced to make by other members of their party. And so really, her authority is getting massively questioned at this point. A day later, so the 4th of October, Kwarteng in an interview appears to blame the Queen's death for market chaos rather than his own mini budget. Again, there's an angry reaction by the media and amongst Tory MPs about this. There was huge pressure going through this period for the government to publish its financial strategy and the forecast of the Office for Budget Responsibility and to bring it forward. This was kind of had been pushed, was way into November, and the budget with no support from the Office of Budget Responsibility was one of the reasons why there'd been so much chaos. And so on the 10th of October, Kwarteng U-turned again and brought the date forward to the 31st of October. So again, we see government policy in flux. We see both Truss and Kwarteng weakened by these significant U-turns, and a real lack of authority is seen. As we then went forward, on the 12th of October, Truss stated there would be no cut in spending to balance the budget. The markets reacted really badly because it's kind of like, well, you can't do both. You can't cut taxes and not cut spending. One of those has to go. So again, this idea of a lack of kind of fiscal responsibility by the government. On the 13th, Kwarteng insists he was fully focused on implementing the mini budget. The markets reacted badly, kind of going, well, this mini budget is unsustainable. It won't work. They were panicked. interest rates are going up on people's mortgages. The market's crashing. The Bank of England is pouring billions and billions of pounds in buying government bonds to try and keep things going. But it looks like Truss and Kwarteng are kind of hell-bent on continuing in the direction that they set. However, a day later, on the 14th of October, Kwarteng is called back early from a meeting in the US and sacked. There isn't a really cringy press conference in which Liz Truss is quizzed by a series of journalists on why Kwarteng has gone and yet she has survived. After all, he was simply implementing her economic strategy. They are kind of close friends. They are ideologically very closely aligned. He was the Chancellor, just implementing the policies that she had run her leadership campaign on. These are the policies he got elected on by the Tory membership. All he does is implement them, and then he carries the can. He gets sacked, and she continues in office. There's another U-turn at that point, and we're told that the plan not to raise corporation tax from 19% to 25% in April, that's now gone. So the rising corporation tax will take place. So yet another U-turn. And Truss's position from this point onwards is looking incredibly weak. Jeremy Hunt is appointed Chancellor, and his appointment seems to bring some calm. He meets with the governor of the Bank of England, and it appears that they're pretty much aligned on policy. He talks about looking to remedy some of the mistakes by his predecessor, and this calms the market. On the 17th of October, Hunt reduced the energy bill support from 2 years to 6 months and scraps much of the rest of Truss's tax cuts, including the cut on basic rate, and there's essentially almost nothing left in that budget in terms of what had gone before. People then start to question as to who was in charge now. It is really Hunt in charge, not Truss, as it's Hunt saying the government's made mistakes and we're going to reverse all of this. Well, actually, the person whose idea these policies were, Truss, is still sat there in number 10. And whilst Truss admitted some mistakes in timing and speed of the tax cuts that she made, she still seems ideologically wedded to the ideas of the policies that she's carried out, while she has a Chancellor who quite clearly isn't, and is unpicking almost everything that she's done. We go forward a couple more days, and we get a new resignation, this time from Braverman. So earlier in the day, Liz Truss had stated she was a fighter, not a quitter, as people were talking about her premiership collapsing into chaos and asking how long will she last, which isn't surprising given the stuff that we've just seen. But then after this, we have Braverman quit for 2 breaches of the ministerial code in terms of using personal email and sharing cabinet materials with someone outside cabinet, which she shouldn't do, and this would seem straightforward enough. A couple of breaches of the ministerial code, minister resigns. This is what should happen. But also in the letter was some really damning criticism of Truss, pretending we haven't made mistakes, carrying on as if everyone can't see that we have made them, and hoping that things will magically come right is not serious politics, she said. An obvious attack at Truss and the policies that she'd been carried out. And she kind of then subtly, not really subtly, calls for Truss to resign. I have made a mistake. I accept responsibility. I resign. And again, I think that the very strong subtext in that is, Liz Truss, you've made mistakes. You should accept responsibility. You should resign. It's reported in the press that Truss and Braverman had a 90-minute row over policy, most notably immigration policy, on which Braverman felt Truss was abandoning the 2019 manifesto pledges. Braverman has much tighter, a stronger view on immigration than Truss appeared to. Truss seemed to want to open up immigration to try and solve some of the skills crisis and improve growth, whilst Braverman wanted to stick to the targets set in 2019. And Braverman essentially here seems to be seen by some as launching a potential leadership bid and appealing to the right of the party. Braverman's resignation is hugely significant in that what's happened is Truss, she'd already kind of fallen out with, lost the support of the One Nation Conservatives in the Conservative Party, and now she's got someone on the right of the party clashing with her as well. So this kind of leaves her without a faction behind her, and in an incredibly weak position. And this is something that the Labour Party go on to exploit. So Labour used their opposition day to raise a motion calling for Parliament to be consulted on any fracking going forward. They were looking to exploit the government's divisions over fracking, on which several Conservative MPs would say they would vote against the government in any fracking motions. They strongly opposed it, either on environmental grounds or and also in a lot of cases you got Conservative MPs where the areas they're looking at fracking is in their constituencies, and so they're opposing it on the constituency basis as well. Now, this is an opposition motion. The chances of it passing are slim to zero as the Conservatives have a large majority. But the Conservative Party essentially, or Truss, kind of said, well, I can see what the Labour Party are up to. They're trying to exploit and show our division, so we won't show any division. So this is a confidence motion to make sure everyone gets in line. So it's a 3-line whip. This means that failing to support the government could cost the MP the whip, as in they would essentially be kicked out of the Conservative Parliamentary Party. This really is raising the stakes enormously on something where it doesn't really need to be. There was then great confusion as 10 minutes before the vote, the Climate Minister said that it wasn't a confidence motion after all. We then see really ugly scenes in the lobbies or outside the lobbies as the whips and senior Tories, including Rees-Mogg and Theresa Coffey, apply pressure for Tory MPs to go into the no lobby. I mean, they were successful. Motion was defeated 326 to 230. The Labour MP Chris Bryant spoke after the vote, calling for an investigation into bullying and physical intimidation of Tory MPs by the whips and leading members of the party. Rumours spread that evening that the Chief Whip and Deputy Chief Whip had both resigned. Some fairly colourful language applied to the Deputy Chief Whip as he walked away from the chaos. It was later denied that they had resigned and they were still in post. But we see absolute chaos, and we also see some real palpable upset and anger amongst some of the Tory MPs. And one of the most notable things that night was watching an interview with the MP Charles Walker. He was clearly angry and upset by what had gone on. He described those in the cabinet as talentless people and said they hoped they were happy with what they'd done in getting Liz Truss into place and accepting positions in her cabinet. He talked of up to 200 Tory MPs losing their seats at the next election. And then the man in a grey suit or blue suit or whatever colour suit he's wearing, the man who seems to ultimately hold all the power in these things, Sir Graham Brady, the chair of the very powerful 1922 Committee of Conservative Backbenchers. So he has a meeting with Liz Truss on October the 20th, and not long afterwards she resigns. And it's clear that he made clear to her in that meeting that she had lost the support of the Conservative backbench, and that it was time for her to move on for the good of the party, probably, and possibly also the nation. And then, as we then went through a very rapid leadership election, which Rishi Sunak won, she gave her final speech. And taking a kind of leaf out of her predecessor's book, she starts quoting ancient history. As the Roman philosopher Seneca wrote, "It's not because things are difficult that we do not dare; it's because we do not dare that they are difficult," suggesting that she feels that she was right all along, and that people just didn't have quite the same insight and bravery that she did. I mean, quoting Seneca may be a little bit dangerous, as also he did things like some tutoring of Nero, who famously or infamously, if the rumour is true, fiddled whilst Rome burnt, and so there's some connections you can make there. She reiterated her belief in lower taxes and in that creating economic growth. So you could potentially argue from this that maybe lessons weren't learned actually by Liz Truss in terms of what happened, and she still stood by her guns. But the Conservative Party certainly didn't stick with her and has changed direction really rather dramatically. And the kind of consequences for attacking her seems to be slim to non-existent, as Braverman is now back in the Home Office, reappointed by Rishi Sunak, despite having resigned from that role about a week before. So Liz Truss essentially is ousted by her own party. And this has led to kind of very significant questions over what next and whether there should be a general election. I don't think there will be, because that really would be turkeys voting for Christmas, because as Charles Walker points out, there's a very significant chance that a large number of Tory MPs could lose their seats. So thank you very much for watching. I hope that's been helpful summarising what went on. Again, lots of stuff that would be really useful in terms of examples in essays for the power of the backbenchers, a really good example of the power of members of cabinet in terms of what happens with Braverman. Lots of stuff that you can use on the role and power of the Prime Minister, and also lots of good stuff for component 2 in terms of the Conservative Party, and also parts of component 1 with the ideological stuff, with the split between the One Nation and New Right in the Conservative Party. So lots of really useful stuff, but also, again, it's just important to stay on top of these things and understand what's going on. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't done already, and check out the other stuff on the channel. Cheers.